I call this meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Would everyone please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, I want to welcome everyone who's here tonight and everyone who's watching us at home. Briefly, I will go through our agenda for this evening. First, we're going to have the consent agenda, which consists of the minutes from the July 8th meeting. Then we'll have a public hearing on a rezoning for Brookwood Village Townhomes. Then we will have 3 items for the First Baptist Church, a public hearing on a rezoning, a site plan design review, and a preliminary plat. We'll hear all of those together, and then we'll vote on them separately. And then we'll have a planned unit, a PUD, final plat, site plan design review for Adams Dairy Landing Lot 3A. And that being said, I'll go to the consent agenda and ask for a motion.
So moved. Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Briefly, I'll remind everyone of our procedures for a public hearing. First off, I will open the public hearing, call for exhibits from the city attorney, and we'll have staff comments. The applicant will make their presentation. Then we'll ask for witnesses in favor of the petition, and then witnesses opposed to the petition. We'll bring it back up here for general discussion on the record, and then I'll close the public hearing, and then we'll vote on the motions. That being said, the first public hearing is on Brookwood Village Townhomes, and I open the public hearing. Mr. McDonald.
Mr. Chairman, the city has 8 exhibits for the rezoning. Number 1 is the staff report with attachments. Number 2 is the affidavit of publication in the Blue Springs Examiner. Number 3 is the application with attachments. Number 4 is the 185-foot notification map. Number 5 is a list of names and addresses of property owners within 185 feet of the site. Number 6 is a copy of the letter sent to those property owners. Number 7 is Title IV Land Use Section, Blue Springs Code of Ordinances. Number 8 is the 2003 Comprehensive Plan. Those are all of the exhibits the city would offer into the record at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Commission. Good evening. Again, this is a request for a rezoning. The property in question is located at the southeast corner, northeast R.D. Mize Road and northeast Sunnyside School Road, comprised of about 1.9 acres. And this particular request is to rezone the property from MF20 with a restricted overlay to MF14. In the first paragraph of the staff report, it sort of summarizes some of what occurred, but the MF20 zoning was a moderate density multifamily district, and when the city did the multifamily design guidelines, they also looked at the various zoning districts, and MF20 was one of them that was eliminated, and that occurred in 2008. The restricted overlay zoning limited the property to a maximum of 32 dwelling units. I won't go over all of the history of this particular property, but many of you will remember that there was a multifamily development that was proposed for this in 2008 at exactly the same time we went through the multifamily design standards. They made it through the process, got to the final plat. Their final plat was held up and put during a moratorium while we looked at those multifamily design standards, and that project just never went forward. This particular project, as outlined again in the first paragraph, they're proposing 4 townhouse buildings, each with 4 dwelling units for a total of 16 units, and the MF14 zoning allows for 14 units per acre, so since they're near 2 acres, they could get somewhere in the neighborhood of 27. It looks like 26 dwelling units total. Well, they're only proposing 16 units, so they're well within the density allowed in that MF14 district. Comprehensive plan for this particular property and in this area is high-density residential, and that's defined as 8 units per acre or more. Again, they're proposing the MF14, which allows for 14 dwelling units. They'll be slightly lower than that, but certainly within the high-density residential definition of the comprehensive plan. The setbacks, we show you the site plan. Oops. There. You can see we don't have a lot of information for this project yet. That will be coming forward in later applications for site plan and design review. However, we did provide the setbacks to you so that you have an idea of what those will be when that project comes forward. Staff is recommending approval of the zoning request to go from MF20 restricted overlay to an MF14. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Holly? Seeing
Thank
none.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Holly. Would the applicant like to come forward and make his presentation? And you will need to be sworn in.
Straight right ahead, please. You solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this case is the truth, so God.
I do.
Need your name and address.
Dan Foster with Schlegel and Associates, that's spelled SCHLAGEL, 14920 West 107th Street, Lenexa, Kansas. Representing the owner of the property, the staff report outlined pretty much the general concept of what we're planning to do here. Generally, it's going to be an extension of the existing townhomes that are already there, similar in style and architecture and things, and we'll also be adding a swimming pool for this development as well. And the project will comply with all the applicable codes and all those kinds of things. So be happy to answer any specific questions that you might have.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? I'm just curious. I know we'll actually look at this later on, but is there going to be a street or a private drive that's going to connect all these, or?
Yeah, there will be a private drive that extends off from Fifth Street, and we've actually already submitted the site plan and landscape plan for the next meeting. So that's already been submitted to the city last Friday. So
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
thank you.
Anyone in the audience who'd like to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone who'd like to speak against it? Seeing none, I'll bring it up here for comments on the record. Again, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion and/or motions?
So this is just for strictly rezoning?
That's correct.
We will get
This
a
is-
shot at the site plan?
We'll get the site plan and we'll get the plating and everything else at a later date.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you, Ms. Banks.
I'd like to make a motion regarding Brookwood Village Townhomes, case number RZ 613-4013, for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Abbott?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Sanders?
Aye.
Commissioner Haney?
Aye.
Commissioner McCall?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Duhan?
Aye.
Commissioner Banks?
Aye.
Commissioner Trozen?
Aye.
Chairman Billups?
Aye. That motion has been approved unanimously, and we'll move on to the City Council with our recommendation. Thank you. We'll now go to the First Baptist Church, and again, as I said, we have 3 items there. First is the public hearing for the rezoning, then is the site plan design review, and then a preliminary plat. We'll hear all of those together and vote on them separately. We'll start with the public hearing, and I'll open the public hearing. Mr. McDonald.
Mr. Chairman, the city has 8 exhibits for the rezoning for the Baptist Church. Number 1 is the staff report with attachments. Number 2 is the affidavit of publication in the paper. Number 3 is the application with attachments. Number 4 is the 185-foot notification map. Number 5 is a list of names and addresses of property owners within that distance of the site. Number 6 is a copy of the letter sent to those property owners. Number 7 is Title IV Land Use Section, Blue Springs Code of Ordinances. Number 8 is the 2003 Comprehensive Plan. Those are all of the exhibits the city would offer into the record at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Ms. Gowdy.
Good evening. All right. Okay, Tonight we have three applications for the First Baptist Church. The first one is the rezoning, which we will consider the site plan design review and then the preliminary plat. The property is located at 26310 Southwest 7 Highway, which is more generally located on the northwest side of 7 Highway at Southwest Wyatt Road. It helps if I pull up the right map here. There we go. Okay. The property is approximately 36.7 acres. It is currently zoned, as you can see on the site map here, it's currently zoned GB along 7 Highway, Central Business, and 2 Family. It was rezoned that way in 2008 with a proposal for a mixed-use development. Obviously, that had some commercial with some residential. That plan, it was never final platted nor received PUD final plan approval, so those plans have expired, but we are left with the 3 zoning districts on the property. Development of the church requires the property to be rezoned, preliminary and final plat approval, and site plan design review approval. Approval of the site plan design review application is contingent upon the rezoning application. That is scheduled to be heard by the mayor and city council on August 5th. The final plat approval is not being sought tonight, but is required prior to issuance of building permits. So the first request for approval is the change of zoning from the 3 districts, general business, central business, and 2 family residential to strictly general business. Rezoning the property to 1 single zoning district is appropriate for the single-use development of the church or religious assembly as it's defined in the UDC. The comprehensive plan designates the property as a multi-use transition district, which is described as a mix of commercial, office, and moderate to high-density residential, which would be used as a buffer to adjacent residential uses. The general business zoning district allows for the mix of commercial while providing a buffer to the proposed residential uses to the west of the property. The UDC defines general business as intended to accommodate general trades, commercial services that are common along 7 Highway. The proposed religious assembly development lends itself to both residential and commercial zoning districts, but is appropriate for general business due to the large scale here. So therefore, staff does recommend approval of the rezoning to general business. The second request tonight is for site plan design review approval. Again, that's contingent on approval of the rezoning. It's for phase development of 122,390 square feet of church that has associated education and office uses with that. So, talk a little bit about the phasing here. The first phase of development, which you can kind of see here, highlighted the main building structure here, some parking on the northwest side and then also on the northeast and southeast. The kind of lightly colored areas, those are for future phases along with other future building construction phases. The first phase of development includes infrastructure improvements and construction of approximately 50,000 square feet of the building and a significant portion of the parking. Again, future phases include approximately 72,000 square feet of building, additional parking, and outdoor recreation fields on Lot 2, which is the lot to the north, which I can show you here. This would be Lot 2 to the north. Access to the property is derived from Wyatt Road. There's currently a drive off of 7 Highway there. There will be 2 proposed driveways. To date, there are no There's no proposed access along 7 Highway, but major road and east-west collector is planned along the northern property line, which would be north of Lot 2 here. Improvements to the northern half of Wyatt Road along the subject property are required to be completed with this project. And to date, a traffic study has not been submitted, but one is required to assess the impacts on Wyatt and 7 Highway. This will be reviewed and must be accepted by the Public Works Department and MoDOT prior to issuance of any building permits. Based upon square footages provided for each use, there are 200, the code requires 265 parking spaces for the first phase of development. This doesn't include all of the school use, but 484 parking spaces have been proposed for the first development, with an additional 390 spaces for future phases of development. Just based on preliminary calculations, they indicate the amount of parking clearly exceeds what our UDC calls for. So staff is asking that a parking study be submitted justifying the number of off-street parking spaces, and that must be provided prior to issuance of building permits. A preliminary landscape plan has been provided that indicates placement and plant unit counts for the site. The actual plant species have not been specified, but they will be required to meet or exceed the approved landscape plan. The landscape plan does meet and exceed the code requirements as it's currently proposed. That includes the open space requirements, buffering, and the parking lot requirements. And then they're also in the central, kind of between lots 1 and 2. This is like a naturalized stream buffer area, which they will be preserving quite a bit of existing trees along the west property line, as well as within this buffer area here. So that also helps to contribute to the landscaping requirements. We are asking that once they get to the final plating stage, that they just preserve this area with a conservation easement, drainage easement, something basically to kind of protect that area. There are two stormwater detention basins for the development. They're both located on Lot 1. The stormwater report has been submitted and accepted by the Public Works Department, but we just obviously keep that updated as any plans and phases move forward. Then a little bit about the building design here. The overall building design is a variation of horizontal rectangular masses, changing in height, setback, textures, and colors along all facades. Large, tall, gray concrete wall panels provide the backdrop to the facade. Aluminum canopies and massings of windows highlight the southeast and northwest entryways. Additional windows and smaller aluminum canopies are along the spans of the northwest, southwest, and southeast facades. Red brick veneer, stone veneer, vertical ribbed concrete, and cedar plank siding of varying complementary and neutral colors provide visual interest for the exterior of the structure. It's my understanding that the applicant has also brought some additional elevations to view tonight, so they can show you those. Staff believes that the use of the concrete panels on the northeast facade should be limited in use, basically to avoid just a single undifferentiated plane. So we are suggesting that they do revise these elevations to provide variation in materials, colors, or other architectural elements to add some kind of differentiation on the northeast elevation. Screening for mechanical equipment and other utilities is required as in accordance with the UDC, must be shown on building permit plans prior to issuance of a building permit. With that, staff does recommend approval of the site plan design review with 9 conditions. And the final application for First Baptist Church is the request for preliminary plat approval of a 2-lot subdivision. The UDC requires the property be platted since it has not previously been platted. The proposed subdivision meets the lot layout requirements for the general business zoning district. You can see here, we've got 2 lots, 7 Highway here. A 5-foot sidewalk is required along 7 Highway as well as White Road. That has to be installed or a financial guarantee submitted prior to city council approval of the final plat. Again, they have not submitted the final plat to date yet, though. And they have also included a 8-foot wide walking path that's part of Lot 2 with some of the recreation fields. That's not a requirement of with the UDC, but that's something they've added to the kind of recreation area with Lot 2. With the exception of the drainage conservation easement necessary to preserve the naturalized area between lots 1 and 2, they've shown all necessary easements. And those easements will be dedicated with the final plat once that's approved and recorded. Staff recommends approval of the preliminary plat with 5 conditions, and I will take any questions.
Are there any questions for staff at this time?
Mr. Chair, I do have a question.
Ms. Banks?
Several times you've mentioned school. On this first phase,
Yeah.
and it's basically comes up on the site plan, it mentions the children's education, but it also mentions several different times school. Are we approving the school as the first phase?
I believe the school is included in the first phase. There is, if I can find it, they do kind of outline how much of the building is going to be for the religious assembly, how much is for office, and how much is for school. Let me see.
So the first phase will be actually the school, and the second phase would be the assembly?
No, I think that it will include all 3 of those, and then in later phases, they'll add on.
Add on.
Yeah. And
And so
that's
they-
probably something the applicant can clarify.
Is this going to be an actual school where children go all the time, or is it just for
Yeah, I don't,
church services?
good question for the applicant.
Because it would make a difference on future decisions.
Any other questions?
I have a question, Chair.
Yes. Mr. Sanders?
Did you mention that there was going to be future parking studies performed?
We are requiring, based on, it's the ITE, the Institute of Engineers, whatever their kind of, they call out for school, religious assembly, all of those uses. We are saying that based on what you predict for those uses, they're going to need to justify how much parking each use needs. At this point, we do think that the proposal exceeds the need, so.
I do have one more question.
Yes, Ms. Banks?
I know right now on Sunday, our police officers have to go down and patrol to let out the Blue Springs Church.
Yeah.
Is the city looking at considering putting a light down there just for Sunday? Rather than, because now we're gonna have 2 churches right close next to each other.
Yeah, right now, a light is not planned for that. We don't have the final traffic study recommendations at this point. So I think that is probably, well, it will be something that will be addressed as they talk about that intersection, how it will be impacted. To my knowledge, though, no one, I think, has talked about adding a stoplight there, so.
Because it is just horrendous
Yeah.
on Sunday with that church. And now we're gonna have 2 large churches.
Hopefully they won't let out at the same time.
I don't know, we could see if we could work something out with them, but I just wondered if that had been considered.
Yes. Mr. Trozen?
In regards to the site plan, when we were looking at the configuration of the building and how it sits on the property, I know you identified the sea of parking in the front as far as with 7 and White. Any consideration of moving the building closer to the intersection and having the parking, on the sides or in the rear of the property?
We had discussed that, and I think that's something the applicant can address, but we had discussed that as well as, the concern for the amount of parking along 7 Highway. Just obviously aesthetically, if they could even enhance that with, some landscaping, some BMP, best management practices as far as, stormwater management. That was definitely one of our concerns. And the first phase of parking does not include a lot of that parking that's right along 7 Highway. So I think with the first phase, that's not as much of a concern, but again, I think we'll go back to, once we actually get a reasonable parking count, what's the best location for that parking?
So there might be a possibility of shifting the building depending upon the result of the study?
I don't think that they are looking at shifting the building. I think they may not need as much parking.
Another question.
Go ahead.
In regards to Lot 2, where you proposed the walking path, I noticed that the access of the walking path, that would be along the proposed sidewalk off of 7 Highway?
There is, I can find it here. The path does connect to the sidewalk, if I recall correctly, off of 7 Highway, and then they also aligned it somewhat meanders along what will be Major Road here. So that would kind of be a connection from the west side properties, once those are developed, to a path to 7 Highway. So with Major Road along here. So, yeah, there's a connection on the north and south side of Lot 2.
So I guess it would be accessible to the public?
That's my understanding, yeah.
There's no vehicular access, though, to that Lot 2 at the current,
Not currently.
unless Major Road comes through.
Right, and Major Road would be just north of the site. Yeah.
Are there any other questions for the staff? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would the applicant like to come forward? And again, you'll need to be sworn in.
So I'm swearing the testimony about to give this case to be the truth, so
I do.
you got.
Yeah, it's Matt Slish with Engineering Solutions, 50 Southeast 30th Street, Lee Summit, Missouri. I think the overall picture of the site is pretty well covered with staff's report. I think most of you are probably very familiar with our project here, in the sense of they're located downtown, they've been downtown, and essentially they've been squeezed. They're out of space. They've hit the limits of using the building and the space and everything they can as far as they can. They bought this property a number of years ago with the hopes of getting out here and building something that could not only grow their worship, but also grow in that area and that help develop that side of town. So part of what the site plan, the location of the parking, and where the building sat was all relation to the point of the site kind of has a fall and gradual kind of fall back towards the back, toward the ditch. So we tried to find a nice fit in there that there wasn't large masses of parking anywhere. Where basically this site could kind of get a nice peripheral or kind of perimeter parking surrounding the whole entire parking lot without creating one central location that we could create just a sea of asphalt. And so while I understand and appreciate the sea of parking that's kind of out along 7, what we're doing at this point is maybe we did go a little parking happy, but they're also very parking poor at their current location. So it's kind of when we're doing this site plan, they were working with the idea of they'd really like to have as much available to them while they're not necessarily going to build, this stuff out on 7 in the near future or even in the distant future. It's one of those things of phase 1 is the parking that's most associated with the buildings that are there, and then where's the next best opportunity to build another parking spot or parking area. And so I think what we've done is try to develop parking with islands and spaces that allows them the opportunity to develop parking to fit this area, and while they have an excess amount currently, they're not more than likely going to reach that number totally, but it gives them opportunities to kind of work with where they might go based on their needs, because obviously as this facility develops, we're talking a number of years for this thing to develop into its full build out. And so, rooms will get repurposed, ideas will get removed and changed and moved around, so things that we may think on the front of the building is a really high access point for them now may not be, so they want more parking in the back. So the intent with the parking is not that it's ever going to be a full build out of that entire parking area. It's more just an idea of this is where parking could go based on the uses in that building and how it might sit in there and work. And as far as the Lot 2 and the kind of the use of that northern area, Blue Springs Christian also bought the property to the north of this site, and they have plans at some point, I'm sure, to develop that area. So what our intent was is we have a nice buffer area between us with the ditch to develop something up there that could be kind of a community gathering space or some type of a space that people can get to. We've shown a couple ball fields or a soccer field up there just to try to gain some interest. And like I say, that trail we did try to do is kind of meander and work it with Wyatt. So potentially if the city, when they got to development Wyatt, didn't want to do a straight sidewalk 8 foot wide the entire way, they could do some meandering down through the parks and maybe it could work into something. But at this point, we're not intending on putting parking lots up there or anything else that kind of promote necessarily a use of it by everybody right now, but maybe by somebody who's coming over to the church and then they're walking over. Because during part of the process, we had talked about maybe putting in some trail systems that went from our site on Lot 1 directly across the creek and up there towards the trail system, which may happen, but at this point there's really just no direct knowledge of where we'd put it or how it might sit in there. So what we try to do is just show the most realistic use of what we'd have up there, just some kind of a trail system that kind of would try to get some community, some gathering pieces up in that area. One question on there was about the preschool or the school that's associated with this site. They currently operate a preschool in their facility, a licensed preschool for everybody up through pre-K for no more than 150 students. And that's all they're intending to do here. No full-on school, no day-to-day operations other than the preschool operations and keeping that going. The traffic study is done. Unfortunately, Ben went on vacation right about the same time as it got in, so it's submitted, but he just hasn't had a chance to review it and look at it very much. But essentially what it does say is we kind of have an interesting situation where we met with MoDOT during the development of this process and said, we understand this intersection is what it is. We understand that this road goes dead end to the west. What do we need to do? And MoDOT basically said that at this particular intersection, they're not going to desire to have a light or an intersection light, because to the south, when Walmart decides to get going, there's going to be a light there. To the north, when Major Road gets there, they're going to have a light there. And so MoDOT's intent was to not make this a consistent every quarter mile stoplight system. So while at this intersection there are going to be delays and slows down, their intent is that on a Sunday morning, those delays and slowdowns aren't as difficult or tough for people to deal with in the sense of it's a one-day morning type operation system. So it may be that this church has to do something similar to what Blue Springs Christian does, where they have to hire the sheriff's department to come out and help direct traffic or help maneuver things around. Because like I say, this site only goes to the east. You know, we can't go anywhere west unless they got a vote or something. So it's kind of their limit. But at this point, MoDOT's recommendation is going to be no light, no signal, improve that intersection to look like it is on the other side of Wyatt so that we have basically the same available turns and moves throughout the entire site. I believe that was all of the questions I heard. A member from the building committee, Jim Beamer, would like to come up and give a few of his thoughts on the site plan and how excited they are about this project. If you can buy him a few more times, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions if you'd like me to do that now, or if you'd like to let Jim come up and just speak, whatever suits you best.
Why don't we wait and do all the questions at the end?
Great.
Okay. And you'll need to be sworn in also, please.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Need your name and address.
Jim Beamer, 1809 Northeast Kestrel Drive, Blue Springs, Missouri. On behalf of First Baptist, I want to thank you all for taking time to hear our case tonight. Our old sanctuary at 14th and Main was built in 1922, and then we added on in the 50s and 1964, and finally 1977 with our big sanctuary where you see it now. And since the 77, we purchased nearby tracts of land for parking, but we've outgrown our parking to the point where we have church members parking on Main Street from 15th all the way down here to Low Drug Building. And we've reached the point where we're landlocked by both the railroad and the Blue Springs Historical District, so there's nowhere to go at this time. And we just feel like we have the opportunity at this time to build a new facility someday down there at 7 Highway in Wyatt to better serve our present members and future members. And With your help and recommendation to rezone this land, we would appreciate any assistance you can give us to help us do what we feel like we are being led to do. Thank you. Any questions?
Were you going to discuss the building plans or the site plan, or?
No, that's up to the
That's
architect.
up to them, okay.
Yeah. But
Are there any questions at this point?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm a little unclear what is considered phase one. Could you identify parking and if lot 2 is part of phase one?
Or I guess we can always go back to, Lauren's got that on PDF. So this. Yes. So everything that is highlighted in the darker gray type of color is our phase one parking. So basically, we're going to create 2 access points onto Wyatt Road, one on kind of the east side of the building and one on the west side of the building. And then the phase one building is just that larger piece that's right there in the middle with some pieces that could get built off kind of on any side of it at any point. And then the lot 2 is intended to be a later phase. Once that site is kind of developed, we're going to work on phase 1, kind of is going to try to work and get that conservation easement area developed a little bit better, clean that up, make that more of a usable space as opposed to kind of a voiding type space as it is now, or just kind of a collect all space. And then as time permits, our time and money of course permits it, start moving into lot 2 development side of it. And I did neglect to answer or mention earlier, we do have a number of people back there that are able to answer any of your questions, as far as we have the architectural firm and many members of the building committee. So any questions you have on any of those sides, please ask.
Do we have any? Yes, go
I
ahead.
have a question. When you do the traffic study, what input do you get from, if you get any input at all, from like Central Jackson County Fire Department or the fire department? Because you're right on the line right there with Central Jackson County, and south of there is Lottawanna, I believe.
Right.
And they've got kind of a mutual agreement, but do they review what you're doing, either one of these groups? Because
They will review once we get closer to the side of the development side of it, and actually starting to worry about getting emergency vehicle access and routes and that type of stuff. At this point, we've met all their criteria in the sense of widths of roadways, locations of fire hydrants and things like that, but if they see things as we get closer to development of construction type plans, that's when they'll see it and make sure that they have any comment type addressed. But as far as the traffic study side of it, I don't know for sure. We didn't perform the traffic study, but I don't know if they actually get direct recommendations or comments from them. I would suggest probably not.
But that will be done later.
Correct, yeah, they'll get their notifications.
Okay, and I'm not sure if you want to address this or if you want to bring up the architect or whatever. The renderings that we have are very nice. I'm kind of old school. I like to see the actual elevations, and I haven't seen those. And there was a question about the northeast facade, and none of these renderings that we have actually show that facade.
Yeah.
So I really would like to see those. And I'd also like to talk about, a little bit about the interior workings of the building, because I can't, just by looking at it, determine what is classroom, what is worship space, what's office space.
Absolutely. That's well inside the building, so the architect, I'll bring him up and let him go through all those pieces.
So I swear the testimony about to give this case, give the truth, so help you out.
I do.
Give your name and address.
I'm Brian Rotsam, last name Rathsam, with Mantel Teeter Architects. We're at 929 Walnut Street. That's Kansas City, Missouri, 64106. I do have, this evening here, I have 4 elevations. What we did was took the 3D model itself, and we were able to essentially transpose that into 2D elevation. So I'll just walk through real quickly each of those 4 elevations. I think that'll get a little bit better idea for some of those views that maybe we're talking about, especially on the northeast side. So. This right here, I'll start on the southeast elevation. You know, again, this is the main entrance to the building, faces the corner, Y Road and 7 Highway. So
Yeah, can you kind of move the mic over a little bit so that we're catching you on camera here, or on the...
Gotcha. Is that better?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Main entrance faces, again, Wyatt Road and 7 Highway. Again, this is going to be probably the main focus of the building and why we oriented it the way that we did, you know, to that corner. You also notice that this elevation does have a lot more of the materials and undulations in it, mainly because this is going to be a facade that is not going to change or not going to be added onto. One of the things that you noticed on the site plan is that on the northeast side is going to be where we have all of our expansions for the children's wing, as well as on the back of the northeast corner, the future sanctuary building. So in this initial phase, one of the, we wanted to try and do is facades that we weren't going to change down the road, give that the brick, the stone, the veneers that we wouldn't be tearing off down the road. And then on those other elevations that we are going to essentially build onto and tear off, maybe not spend the money at this point in time, because eventually that will be built onto and will continue a style, you know, similar to what we're looking at here. And this is the northwest elevation. Again, I apologize, it's a little bit dark. But again, this the main entrance on the back side, and again, with some of the discussions about the parking, what we really wanted to try and do was get balanced parking around the site so that we had a good amount of availability on both sides and weren't forcing everybody to essentially come in one main entrance. The foyer that we have designed there is essentially going to be our main central core, and from that radiate off of the children's wing, the 2 sanctuaries, the youth building, the administration building, and it's accessed on both the northwest elevation as well as the southeast elevation. This is the southwest elevation here. Again, what we're looking at right now is essentially the back side of the sanctuary, so a very high volume. It does face essentially away from most of the views on 7 Highway. And with the high volume of space that we do have, it gets to be a bit more difficult to bring in some of the materials like we have on the front side and provide those undulations, again, looking at possibly doing the tilt-up concrete construction. Northeast elevation that I think we were discussing here. Again, this elevation from this corner to this corner is going to be the furthest most portion of the building. The children's wing, as you can see, there'll be play equipment outside, and again, daytime entrances for that preschool. But this will be an elevation that again will be built onto down the road, and as well as this entire space from that corner to that corner will also have a future sanctuary addition as well as second worship venue on site that will fill that space. So again, eventually down the road, this is not what that view is going to look like, but at this point in time, those are the materials that have been proposed.
Okay, we'd like to have copies of those drawings to add into our records if we could, please.
I brought 12 copies of each of those along.
We just need
one
set. That we can add into the record. You say that whole facade there is very, very plain because it may eventually get added onto. May eventually, time frame wise, we may be looking at that blank facade for 15, 20 years. What kind of a time frame are we talking about?
The hope wouldn't be that it would be 15, 20 years, but we've worked with churches for over 50 years. And that exact question has come up on many times when we look at churches and realize that we've done a master plan on a project that's happened, 20, 30 years ago, and they're still, at some point in time, waiting to expand that. We've also worked with churches that within, 3 to 5 years, they've already built that out because of the growth and, what's happened in the church. So I'd like to say that it would be between that 5-10-year range that we would do that, but I don't have the crystal ball to decide today if that's indeed the case, so.
It's even 5 to 10 years is a long time to be looking at that blank wall as you're coming south on 7 Highway. It's, okay. And again, as far as the interior spaces, you said that this northeast section is basically the children's section. How, again, I don't have any kind of a floor plan or anything else. How is the interior of this model? Because I can't just look at it and decide what's the worship space and what's the office space and what's everything else.
Okay. This will probably not fit, but I can slide it around a little bit here. This about gets most of it on. It does cut a little bit of the children's wing off, but I'll walk through just real quickly the various spaces. So the bottom of the page here, this is our essentially our southeast elevation that faces out towards Highway 7 and Wyatt Road. So the main entrance would be right here. And again, this entire central core is our foyer space, and that is a foyer space that's going to be designed not only for this current sanctuary that we're designing here, but also for the future sanctuary that will be located essentially in this area right here. So the Phase 1 administration wing is down on this corner, right adjacent to the first phase 1,000-seat sanctuary that we have designed. The youth space, their own worship venue and classroom space, is over on the northwest side here. And then the children's wing, pull this over. This is the entire first phase children's wing. Nursery and pre-K in this first space here, and then K through 5 would be in this area here. Now, I do want to mention that we talked about during the week, a preschool that would be using it. This would be the space that they would be using during the week. That K through 5 would strictly be for the religious education.
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot. Are there any further questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Any other comments that you'd like to make before we move on? Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak strictly in regards to the rezoning for the proposal? Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak against it? Seeing none, I'll bring it back up here for rezoning comments on the record. And I'll close the public hearing. And now we'll move on to the rezoning issue for a separate vote. Any comments and/or motions on the rezoning?
Mr. Chairman, I would
Mr. Graham.
move to approve the rezoning for First Baptist Church RZ-6-13-4014.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Wallace.
Aye.
Commissioner Sanders.
Aye.
Commissioner Haney.
Aye.
Commissioner McCall. Aye. Commissioner Graham.
Aye.
Commissioner Abbott.
Aye.
Commissioner Duhon. Aye. Commissioner Banks.
Aye.
Commissioner Trozen.
Aye.
And Chairman Billups.
Aye. So the rezoning is a unanimous vote, and that motion will go on to the City Council for their consideration. And then we move on to the site plan design review. Any additional comments on that issue and/or motions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Wallace.
I would like to make a motion for approval of the site plan and design review, SPDR 6-13-40-4016, for the site plan and design review.
Second.
With the 9 staff recommendations.
Second.
And a second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That site plan has been approved. And we move on to the preliminary plat. And again, any comments on that and/or motions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Haney.
I move approval of First Baptist Church preliminary plat, PP 6134015, with the staff recommendation. 5.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that preliminary plat has also been approved. And with that, we will move on to agenda item number 6, which is PUD final plan, site plan design review for Adams Dairy Landing. Mr. Holly.
Just a moment, I'm going to change some elevation, some materials board around here, and then I will begin. Thank you. The request, again, is an approval of a final PUD plan and site plan and design review in order to allow the construction of an 8,710 square foot multi-tenant building on approximately 1.1 acres in Area 2 of Adams Dairy Landing. And as you can see on the screen, Area 2 is located north of Northeast Coronado. And this particular lot is approximately 900 feet east of Adams Dairy Parkway. You'll likely remember that in July 1st actually of this year, the Planning Commission considered a rezoning request as well as a PUD concept plan amendment. The rezoning was really in conjunction with the PUD concept plan change because the restricted overlay zoning. Both were considered in July 1st Planning Commission meeting, and a recommendation for approval was given to the City Council, who then on July 15th excuse me, approved both the PUD concept plan and the rezoning. An amended PUD final plat also was considered on July 1st and was approved by the City Council then on July 15th. That leaves us then with the site plan. We'll kind of go through these elevations, excuse me, real quick, and go to a site plan that is consistent with that concept plan that was approved. In terms of overall access to this particular property, it's gained from a private driveway that comes off of Northeast Coronado Drive. The access comes up along the building and past the building to the back. Chairman Billups, I spoke with you earlier today, and we discussed maybe why that driveway is to the back, and I followed up with Public Works to make sure that I was correct in that there was a lot of concern that if a driveway were to have been located to access the front property, the front parking lot, the lot closest to Northeast Coronado, that cars making that turning movement would create a slowdown and a possible backup of traffic both coming along Northeast Coronado Drive, as well as perhaps trying to cross from the south side of Northeast Coronado to the north side if they were coming into that development. So the concern is to make sure we keep traffic off of Northeast Coronado, at least keep it moving. Parking for this particular proposal, the proposed plan for the overall development of Area 2 is proposing roughly 350 parking stalls at this point. Originally was approved with 382. There's roughly 290 parking spaces for the entirety of Area 2, not for just this lot, that are required based on the currently proposed uses. Again, the plan is providing is providing 350, which is in excess of what's required, but given that the uses at this particular point for 3 of the lots are yet to be defined, that particular parking may change in the future, or it may stay the same because the parking is needed for the uses being proposed. For this particular lot, Lot 3A, the applicant is proposing 45 parking spaces, and based on the office retail use of the building and the size of the building, there are 45 spaces that would be required. So in essence, they just meet their parking requirement for this particular lot. Again, the truck loading hasn't been shown on this particular plan, but it is a requirement of the UDC, and it will have to be shown prior to building permit issuance, and that is reflected in condition number 2 of the staff report. Sidewalks, pedestrian access has always been something that's been talked about for Adams Dairy Landing, and the north-south crosswalk markings have been provided along the east leg, and I think I'm going to switch to the dot cam and kind of show you an aerial, because I think it's going to be easier to explain it when we're looking at an aerial photo of it. We're not exactly sure how this all came about. But when we're looking at the bottom of page 6, I'm sorry, of 13, there's sort of a lengthy discussion about the sidewalk in there. Okay. The site we're looking at right now is this corner right here. There is a crosswalk that's been provided here, a pole that's been provided here, but there is no pedestrian light nor pedestrian button that gets you across from there. The applicant talked about possibly putting not necessarily moving the crosswalk, but putting a crosswalk along here, because there is a crosswalk here, and there is a pedestrian signal on this pole, as well as, well, I don't believe there are push buttons for that. That's something they'll add either way. So, staff is willing to work with them however we need to work with them. Eventually, we would like to see all 4 legs of that intersection have a crosswalk with pedestrian lights as well as pedestrian buttons for crossing. If they choose to put their pedestrian access on this side because of where the pedestrian light is now, we would likely require that they put the crosswalk through here and a pedestrian light and button here. We're pretty much leaving it up to them as to how they do that, but the bottom line is that eventually we hope to see all 4 legs of the intersection with pedestrian markings as well as the pedestrian lights and buttons, so that you can safely get across Northeast Coronado regardless of whether you're going to the east side or the west side of the private drive on the north side. And that is reflected in condition number 3 as well as condition number 7E on the staff report. There really is no significant change in the parking lot lighting. because the parking configuration is a little bit different, there may be some movement of the light standards as compared to what was originally proposed, but it's not going to be significant, and the intensity of the light will remain within the confinements of the UDC. There is a master sign program for this particular project, and they will need to follow the master sign program. If they propose anything outside of that, it would come back to this body. Screening for the property, again, I'm sorry, for the equipment, is a requirement of the UDC. That's reflected in condition number 4. They haven't shown us where all the equipment is, other than a transformer on the northeast side of the building. Northwest side of the building. They have provided landscaping around that particular transformer, but we're not sure where the rest of the equipment will be, but they will be required to screen it. And again, that's reflected in condition number 4. Details of the trash enclosure will need to be provided with the building permit drawings. Again, that's a requirement of the UDC, and they'll have to provide us that when they submit their building plans. Landscaping, I think we'll go back to the doc cam for a minute, because this wasn't included in your packet. This is the originally approved landscape plan of the areas that the developer, and that would be Red Development, is responsible for. And the reason that it is important is because it is this landscaping that remains within code compliance, within the original approval of what was provided for Area 2, as well as other areas within the development. The landscape plan, this is similar to the landscape plan that's in your packet, with the exception of we requested that they add that landscaping that the developer will be putting in to show you roughly where those areas fall, so that you can see east of, in this area here. That would be the developer's responsibility, and again, that would be, that would coincide with Lot 3B. And then there is a small area at the northern portion of the site up at the top that is also the developer's responsibility, and that is along I-70. So with that, the plant units that are being proposed for Lot 3A meet those minimum requirements that were set forth in the original approval. For Lot 3, the developer was required to put in 432 plant units in order to meet the landscape requirements. 175 of those plant units were for open space, and 257 of those plant units were for parking areas. Since Lot 3 has now been split in half, and it's now 3A and 3B, we pretty much cut that number in half and assigned half of the plant units to Lot 3A and half to 3B. And therefore, the developer is providing 228.5 plant units total. 128 of those plant units are applied to the parking lot landscaping, and 100.5 are applied to the open space landscaping. The long and the short of it is they're providing a few plant units in addition to what they would be required if we just cut it directly in half, so they are meeting the code requirement and are consistent with the approved then PUD plan. Open space for Area 2 is not changing. It will remain at 33%. And stormwater detention, we are requiring, because of the change of use, the change of building configuration. Lot 3 was to be originally developed with a larger, well, actually the building itself wasn't larger, but it was a different type of use with more parking. And the analysis that was provided for stormwater runoff gave us a number. We provided it in the report. It's 92. Please don't ask me what that means. I have no idea what that means from a runoff curve standpoint, but Mr. Sal here, I'm sure does. And we're requesting that they verify that that number is not exceeded so that the detention remains adequate to handle the stormwater runoff. And that's reflected in condition 7C. With the building elevations, I won't go into a lot of detail with the elevations other than to say that they are consistent with the Adams Dairy Landing design criteria as well as other buildings within Adams Dairy Landing. They have a good mix of materials they're using. As you can see in the materials board behind me, they have stone, brick, ephes, and then the typical types of glazing for retail types of uses, and the framing that goes along with that, which is the bronze. They have provided tower elements to this building. That's consistent with the buildings that are already out there, and particularly those in Area 2. With that, I'll leave the rest for the developer/architect to discuss. And staff is recommending approval with 8 conditions. And with that, I'll stand for any questions, and I know the developer is here as well.
Do we have any questions for staff at this point? Mr. Hawley, I do have a question. As you said, I had a concern about the parking access, and I understand the stacking issue. However, I also know that when we do things like this, where we force people to drive all the way around a building to get to the front of it, we really frustrate some of our public. And there is actually a loading area marked on this map. And if there is a truck parked in that loading area, nobody's going to be able to get to the front of the building because of where it is. It was on the first.
It was on this one?
That one right there.
This map?
So it's right in the rear main drive.
In this area right here?
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you had a truck parked there, and I realize most of the trucks are probably not going to be there during business hours, but
If they
since
were,
we
it
don't
would be
know
hard,
what the
it would
retail
be hard
uses
to
are,
look at. Mhm.
could be a UPS truck or whatever, you're going to completely block any access to that building at all.
Yeah, that loading area certainly could be relocated within another area if need be. Loading areas, loading spaces as well as parking spaces the two can double as one, because you're right, loading typically occurs during non-office hours. So at any rate, we can look at that and we can change the location of the loading space. Still doesn't address the frustration, and I know people do have frustration with having to drive all the way back and then come around.
I hear a lot of concern, shall we say, about some of the access routes that we put in place because of stacking issues that people find very confusing and very aggravating. So I hate to do something like this, I really do, especially when the original proposal that we had in place, again, which was not this building, I understand, had the building right up against Coronado.
Exactly.
And didn't have this same kind of an issue, where it fronted really to its parking lot.
Exactly.
So I don't know of any way we couldn't really move this building forward, because we'd have to turn the whole thing around, then we'd have the back facing Coronado, but it's definitely frustrating for me, and I know it's going to be frustrating for a lot of our citizens.
I understand.
I'd like to see some kind of a solution to that, and I understand the stacking problem, but I'd like to see some kind of solution to that. Are there any other questions? If not, we'll move on.
Thank you.
Would the applicant like to come forward and make their presentation, please?
Good evening, I'm Sean Duke with Lute Jim, the civil engineer on the project, and here on behalf of the developer, and have David Perlman with BRR Architecture, who is the architect on the project. I think Jim did a good job explaining the project to you. Just to start real quick on a couple of those questions you had. The loading zone we've shown behind the building there, it's typical of what we've shown several of the loading zones across these out parcel lots. Most of these lots are just designed to have small trucks, not semi-trucks or anything like that, parked behind there, taking that whole drive. We're required to show a space that's 14 feet by 50 feet, which takes up roughly half that drive lane. So there's room to pass alongside a truck park there. In reality, though, most of these loading deliveries will take place in off hours, so there won't be a time when they're trying not to have these deliveries when there are actually customers in this area. We could certainly look at moving this back into those parking stalls back behind it. I don't see any reason why that couldn't be adjusted there because of the type of deliveries we're going to get. Let's see. And as far as that drive access coming out the back, that is part of that traffic study. They recommend that certain, I believe it was 200 some feet of stacking distance for that turn lane. With that restriction there that we've put together, this site plan to utilize that. There also will be eventually an access that cuts across from Arby's there to the east. So you will also have traffic that can come in from that direction and come along the front eventually once 3B is developed to allow access to come into the front of those lots and then circulate back around. So there'll be some other additional opportunities for circulation once 3B is developed. With that said, we have reviewed all the staff comments and the conditions, and we are in agreement with those, and we'll meet those conditions. Are there any additional questions?
Are there any questions for the applicant? I guess not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bring it back up here for any discussion and or motion. Again, I would like to see that loading area relocated just into one of the parking spaces, just so that if that does become some retail space, that we get a couple of UPS trucks in there or something like that, it's going to be aggravating. Any motions?
You might want to just include that in a motion, with the motion.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Banks?
I'd like to make a motion regarding Adams Dairy Landing, Area 2, Lot 3A, case number PUDS-6-13-4017, with the 8 staff conditions, including driveway realignment. Can I have that?
Not driveway realignment, just the loading area relocation.
Relocation, thank you.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That site plan has been approved. Thank you. Okay. If we move on to any other business, Mr. Hawley, do you have anything to share with us this evening?
Not a lot. I did want to let you know from the steering, comprehensive plan steering committee side, work continues on an area plan, and hopefully none of you were too upset that you didn't have a steering committee meeting. We thought maybe it would be a good time for a little bit of a reprieve tonight anyway, but particularly because as the area plan was being developed, we didn't feel it was far enough along to really give you a good opportunity to make meaningful comments to it. So they're continuing to develop that. They're looking at an area plan for 7 Highway and 40 as being the first sort of test area to put in front of you. So again, as I said, or as was said in the email, we will keep you apprised of what's going on and let you know when our next steering committee meeting is. We certainly are anticipating that to be August, of course. So with that, I don't have much else.
Thank you. Is there anything that anybody else would like to add? My normal bi-weekly calendar, I guess I'd like to remind everybody that this Friday downtown is the second of our street flicks. Bring everybody down and watch Peter Pan. And on August 17th at City Hall is the Shred event where citizens are allowed to bring in, I believe it's 4 bags, 4 grocery bags of documents to be shredded at no charge. And that goes from 9 to 11:30 in the morning. So if there isn't anything else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.